And the next thing we looked at was statistics, and it shows here that was last saved by Dennis.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the most ridiculous blunders that resulted in a murderer's capture.
He just had a gut feeling that something might be wrong.
Debit card carelessness, Israel Keys. This otherwise meticulous serial killer was undone by a lapse in his calculated methods.
When I was smart, I would let them come to me.
In 2012, after abducting and murdering Anchorage barista Samantha Koenig, Keys used her debit card to withdraw ransom money across several states, transactions which allowed law enforcement to track his movements. On March 13, 2012, Texas Highway Patrol officers arrested Keys in Lufkin, Texas, after noticing his vehicle matched one identified in surveillance footage. A search revealed Koenig's ATM card, cell phone, and dyed cash from a bank robbery, sealing his fate. Despite Keys' efforts to remain anonymous, a digital breadcrumb trail led to his capture.
We did spend a fair amount of time talking about his crimes and his offenses as well, and those times were definitely very chilling to hear him talk about what he's done.
Capturing a young forensic genius, Bobby Joe Long. In November 1984, Bobby Joe Long abducted Lisa McVey in Tampa, Florida.
This guy, he knew what he was doing. He had me. Forgot. I could have been dead. I could have been lying down in some ditch or somewhere.
During her 26-hour captivity, McVey manipulated Long into trusting her, strategically left fingerprints in key areas, and memorized critical details about his appearance, vehicle, and residence. After her release, she provided this information to the police. Forensic evidence, including matching red carpet fibers, linked Long to multiple crime scenes. He confessed to the murders of 10 women and was sentenced to death. McVey's bravery and quick thinking were instrumental in ending Long's killing spree, and she'd go on to become a police officer.
What he did was horrendous. How he did it, these girls, these victims, didn't deserve to be killed.
DUI. Randy Kraft. Known as the scorecard killer and freeway killer, Kraft was apprehended in 1983 during a routine traffic stop in Orange County, California, when a highway patrol officer noticed him driving erratically and pulled him over. Sure enough, the officers discovered open beer bottles in the vehicle. But that's not all. There was also a deceased Marine in the passenger seat, as well as tranquilizers and a list of coded references to victims.
Then, yet another stunning discovery in the trunk of the Celica, a notebook with handwritten cryptic notes on as many as 67 victims dating back to the 1970s.
This list, later dubbed the scorecard, contained cryptic entries believed to correspond to Kraft's victims. The evidence led to Kraft's conviction for 16 murders, though he is suspected of committing up to 67.
They helped convince a jury to send Kraft to death row. And that's where he is still.
Dropping something important. Peter Gerbles. It doesn't get much more incriminating than leaving your ID at the crime scene. Between 1984 and 1985, Gerbles strangled 4 women in Germany, saving his crimes for Saturdays and Sundays to accommodate his day job at a factory. While police initially struggled to nab the culprit, Gerbles offered himself up on a platter, albeit accidentally, when he dropped his identification card as he fled from police. Gerbles isn't one of the better-known serial killers, but he's certainly noteworthy for the way he was caught. Novel. Christian Bala. They say write what you know, but that advice backfired spectacularly for Bala. In 2007, the Polish author was convicted of orchestrating the 2000 torture and murder of Dariusz Januszewski, a businessman suspected of having an affair with Bala's ex-wife. The case went cold until 2003, when Bala published Amok, a novel featuring a murder eerily similar to Januszewski's, down to details that had never been made public.
The book is about one man's descent into a spree of increasing depravity. Sex, violence, drugs.
Investigators also discovered that Bala had sold the victim's cell phone online just days after the killing. Though the evidence was circumstantial, it was compelling enough to secure a 25-year prison sentence. Bala's attempt to blur fiction and reality ultimately exposed him as a killer hiding in plain sight.
The story of a postmodern killer openly boasting about his crimes through his work was too good to ignore, so the place was packed as the trial kicked off.
Shirt, Timothy McVey. You have no doubt heard of the Oklahoma City bombing, a devastating domestic terrorist attack in 1995.
Are there people missing from your office?
Yeah, 26.
The perpetrator, Timothy McVey, detonated a truck bomb outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in the state's capital, killing 168 people and injuring over 600 more.
I intend to recommend to the Department of Justice and the Attorney General of the United States that the death penalty be sought.
Just 90 minutes later, State Trooper Charlie Hanger pulled pulled over McVey for driving without a license plate. During the stop, Hanger also discovered that McVey was illegally carrying a concealed weapon, not to mention wearing a shirt bearing the same phrase reportedly uttered by Abraham Lincoln's killer.
He said, "My weapon is loaded." And I nudged him a little bit with the barrel of my weapon, and I said, "Well, so is mine."
It was this traffic stop that led to McVey's identification and conviction. Arrest by chance, Peter Sutcliffe. You'd be surprised how many serial killers are done in by license plates. Such was the case of Sutcliffe, or the Yorkshire Ripper, who had previously evaded capture for years despite multiple run-ins with law enforcement.
Peter was interviewed, but on the night in question, he said he was at a party and his members of his family confirmed that he had been at the party.
On January 2nd, 1981, Sutcliffe's luck ran out when officers in Sheffield stopped him for driving a car with false plates.
I got out of the car, approached the driver, asked him his name and address. He actually gave me false details.
During the arrest, Sutcliffe requested to relieve himself and used the opportunity to hide a knife and hammer near the scene. A subsequent search uncovered these weapons, and when confronted with the evidence, Sutcliffe confessed to murdering 13 women and attempting to kill 7 others between 1975 and 1980.
It took away my freedom. It took away a lot of my life. The night that he attacked me. And that I never get back. I'll never ever get it back.
Big Mouth, Robert Durst. This famed real estate heir had long been suspected in multiple disappearances and murders, including that of his wife Kathleen McCormick.
Now, Janine Pirro can go to the grand jury and say, this person is going to be tried for murder in Galveston. That's going to make it much more likely that they're going to want to indict me for Cassie.
But it was the 2015 HBO documentary series The Jinx that brought new evidence to light. In the series' final episode, Durst was caught on a hot mic in the bathroom, muttering about what he'd done.
What the hell are you doing? Kill them all, of course.
This apparent confession, along with a letter linking him to the 2000 murder of his friend Susan Berman, led to his arrest on March 14, 2015, just one day before the finale aired.
We did reach Douglas Durst, Robert Durst's brother, who is now the head of the family's real estate empire. He released a statement that says, "We are relieved and also grateful to everyone who assisted in the arrest of Robert Durst. We hope he will finally be held accountable for all he has done." Durst
was convicted of Berman's murder in 2021 and sentenced to life in prison, where he died a year later. Plumbing problems. Dennis Nielsen. In 1983, this Scotsman's murderous spree came to an end thanks to a plumbing problem.
The toilets had been blocked and an engineer had been called to clear the drains.
Neighbors in his North London apartment complex complained about clogged drains, prompting a plumber to investigate. To the plumber's horror, human flesh and bones were blocking the pipes.
When I arrived to Cranley Gardens, the police were unsure of their ground.
Nielsen, a former civil servant, had been luring young men to his flat, where he killed and dismembered them, disposing of remains by flushing them down the toilet or hiding them under floorboards. Upon arrest, Nielsen confessed to murdering at least 15 men between 1978 and 1983. He was convicted of 6 counts of murder and 2 of attempted murder, receiving a life sentence. Bad Hair Day. Earl Nelson. Active in the 1920s, Nelson was sometimes called the gorilla killer, not because his victims were apes, but because he sported a stocky build with long arms and sizable hands. Nelson's modus operandi involved renting rooms from landladies, whom he would then strangle.
While they were in the house, he tricked Virginia into looking up at the ceiling, and when she looked up, he saw his opportunity and he started strangling her.
His comeuppance came when he visited a barbershop in 1927. The man cutting his hair noticed dried blood and scratch marks on Nelson's scalp, and was understandably unsettled.
Earl had also stolen several items from various victims and pawned them off, so there were certain items at these pawn shops that were connected to him as well.
Only a few days later, police nabbed the Gorilla Man in Killarney, Manitoba. In January of the next year, he was executed by hanging in Winnipeg. Neville Heath's hotel stay.
She met Neville Heath, probably impressed by this military bearing, and he put himself over as a lieutenant colonel. He took her out to dinner and persuaded her to come back to the hotel room.
This Brit's killing spree was cut short by one careless check-in. In 1946, Heath, a World War II veteran, developed a strange pattern of checking into hotels and picking up women, 2 of whom he murdered. And he might have gotten away with it, but for the critical mistake of using his real name when checking in with one of his conquests at a hotel.
She was a pretty thing. Tall, slender. I think London rather dazzled her. You know these small-town girls.
Not quite as you do, I imagine.
Though the other times he was careful enough to use pseudonyms, Heath apparently believed that simply adding the military title lieutenant colonel to his name would be enough to avoid suspicion. This misguided decision not only led directly to his arrest, but also secured his place among the most incompetent criminals of all time.
If they could prove insanity in some form, then actually they stood a lot better chance of being reprieved.
Joel Rifkin's missing license plate.
Drug-addicted, disease-carrying vermin is the lie I told myself.
This Long Island native is currently serving a 203-year sentence for the brutal deaths of at least 9 women, though he actually confessed to several more. Rifkin targeted vulnerable females in the New York City area, typically dismembering them and scattering their remains in rivers, woodlands, and golf courses.
There were mini clusters. Little, sets of 3.
In 1993, he was brought to justice during a routine traffic stop because he was driving without a license plate. When he attempted to flee, a high-speed chase ensued, ending with a collision. Upon inspecting his truck, officers discovered the decomposing body of Tiffany Bresciani. The moral of Rifkin's story? Never drive without a license plate, or run from the police, or, murder people.
Would you have killed again if you weren't caught?
As much as I say I wanted to stop, there probably would have been others.
Maury Travis's map.
We had several theories developed as to why they stopped in October. Perhaps the 9/11 crisis that occurred, perhaps this person was in the military.
When you're this vocal about your crimes, should it really come as a shock when you end up in prison? This St. Louis waiter didn't seem to think so. In the early 2000s, Travis left a trail of victims and even created a torture chamber in his basement where he filmed grisly snuff films.
There was a need, I felt, and some of the people at our paper felt also, to put faces and a humanity to these women.
When a story about one of the slayings was published in the newspaper, Travis responded with what he thought was an anonymous letter, attaching a printed map that revealed the location of the body. What Travis failed to realize was that the map contained a URL identifier, which gave investigators the evidence they needed to apprehend Travis.
We could tell it was computer generated, though he had cut off the borders, and we didn't know what website it came from.
Between this and the lovely videos, Travis had a lot of explaining to do. David Burkowitz's parking ticket.
David Burkowitz, 24 years old, a postal worker, walked out of his Yonkers apartment last night, turned the ignition key in his car, and found himself surrounded by police. Well, he said, "You got me."
Better known as the Son of Sam, Burkowitz tormented New York City in the 1970s with a series of random shootings. Claiming to be in cahoots with a demonic dog, he taunted the police and media with handwritten letters that fueled public fear. One night, Burkowitz parked near a fire hydrant in Brooklyn, which any experienced driver knows is a parking no-no.
The detectives of the Brooklyn Omega Squad, part of that 300-cop 44-killer manhunt, captured the man they say is Son of Sam.
A witness later reported a suspicious figure near the scene, and police began combing through traffic tickets issued in the area that night. Upon further investigation, they found a rifle and a bag filled with ammunition in Burkowitz's vehicle, leading to his swift arrest and an alarmingly proud confession.
Son of Sam killed 6 and wounded 7. How many people do you know, your neighbors, people who might fit that description? Nice, quiet, a little moody, kept to himself.
Charles Ing's Stolen Fish.
They combust the fantasy because they start saying to each other, what we need is to have lots of children to repopulate the world and make better citizens, a kind of social engineering project.
Imagine nearly getting away with multiple gruesome murders and then sacrificing it all for a can of salmon. With his accomplice Leonard Lake, Ing subjected people of various ages to horrific abuse before taking their lives. They had even created a horrendous dungeon on a property they used in Calaveras County, California.
Ing was a very shy person who himself could not have done this, but happily joined the venture so that he would have a chance of the kind of sexuality his shyness made impossible.
While on the lam in Canada, Ng, who suffers from kleptomania, shoplifted some canned fish from a department store. His arrest for this offense eventually revealed him to be wanted in the United States. That small theft set off a chain of events that ended his deadly spree and landed Ng on death row.
The evidence was so overwhelming. When you consider the fact that you had him on film with a number of the victims telling them that he was going to kill them, along with all of the other evidence that was found, it was a pretty rock-solid case.
Albert Fish's Watermark. Known as the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Boogeyman, and the Gray Man, Fish was infamous for his carnage. However, his reign of terror over New York City came to an end with a careless mistake involving a single piece of paper. After kidnapping and cannibalizing young Grace Budd in 1928, he sent a gruesome letter to her family, filled with chilling details of the crime and erratic psychological ramblings. Unbeknownst to Fish, the envelope containing the letter bore a distinctive watermark reading New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. This small clue led the police directly to the rooming house where he was staying, resulting in his arrest. The Linz Angels' arrogance. The so-called Linz Angels of Death consisted of 4 Austrian nurses' aides who preyed upon the elderly. The women would forcibly cause patients to overdose on morphine and tranquilizers. Other times, they drowned patients by filling their lungs with water. Although the angels claimed they simply wanted to put people out of their misery, it's largely believed they acted out of sadism rather than mercy. To add another layer of disturbing to the story, the angels would likely have gotten away with countless more murders had they not been overheard arrogantly discussing their secret out loud at a tavern. Charles Schmidt's show and tell.
Everybody had slept with their doors unlocked and the windows open and so forth. But things were starting to change dramatically.
Time for a serial killer pro tip. After you've killed someone, it's generally not a great idea to show off the body. Schmidt, also known as the Pied Piper of Tucson, strangled his girlfriend Gretchen Fritz, as well as her younger sister Wendy in 1965. This was more than a year after he had bludgeoned another young woman named Aline Rowe to death with a rock.
Had a fake bridge on his nose where he said it was broken. It wasn't. But it looked good.
Apparently unable to resist bragging about his exploits, Schmidt showed his best friend Richard Bruns where he had buried the sisters' bodies. Bruns became frightened and alerted the authorities, bringing Schmidt's spree to a close.
Reportedly, his mother chose to bury him here in the prison cemetery, thinking that if she buried him on a public site, his tombstone would be vandalized.
Ted Bundy's stolen car.
One of his interviews, the interviewer asked him point blank, he said, "Ted, why did you kill?" And Ted kind of raised one eyebrow and kind of smiled and says, "Because I liked it."
Bundy is often considered one of the slickest and most cunning serial killers in history, but this story doesn't exactly support that idea. You're likely familiar with Bundy's dark deeds. He used his good looks and charisma to gain the trust of dozens of women, whom he then proceeded to murder in cold blood.
Just barely 20 years of age, I had a 1-month-old little girl at home.
This proud, pompous psychopath managed to escape police custody several times before finally being caught in Florida, where he was driving a stolen vehicle, which eventually turned out to have evidence of his misdeeds. Though he attempted to flee once more, this encounter resulted in his capture and ultimately execution.
I was not really happy, but kind of relieved. Normally, I don't very often agree with the death penalty, but with him, it was necessary.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Dennis Rader's floppy disk.
They said that there's a real possibility that the Shirley Vian case is connected to the Otero case.
The infamous BTK killer eluded capture for 3 decades until a foolish lapse of judgment cost him his freedom. Beginning in the 1970s, Rader terrorized the Midwest with the vicious and mysterious slaying of numerous citizens. Like many of his kind, he enjoyed taunting detectives with letters and clues.
This letter is very clear to tell us, you have the wrong people. You need to stop looking at them. You need to come back and focus your attention on me. I am the important one.
In 2004, after years of silence, Rader asked in one of his notes whether he could safely send a floppy disk without being traced. The police, playing along, assured him it was fine, and he naively believed them. This, of course, proved to be the rookie mistake that finally did Rader in. Police used information on the disk to gain his identity.
Sure, if you like.
because I was trying to catch you.
I lied to you because I was trying to catch you. And he was incredulous to the fact that I wanted this to end.
Did we miss any serial killer slip-ups? Let us know in the comments.
This is it. You know, we've got you.